On Sunday, 3 Jews were murdered in Jerusalem. I didn't hear the UN condemn the Arabs for murdering those Jews. I waited and 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 nothing. Nothing. I didn't hear the new Jewish agenda condemn them. I didn't hear Peace Now condemn them. But when the Arabs on the Temple Mount, our Temple Mount, the site of King Solomon's temple, and the second temple, long before there was Islam, when thousands of Arabs, for 15 minutes, threw stones, heavy stones, it was only God's miracle that no one was killed there. And then they attacked the police station and burned it down. You hear that? It's very important that every single Jew, listen to that. You see? What they're screaming is, Allah is great. That was what the fellow who murdered the 3 Jews did. We're not stopping. Don't worry, this is a temporary... Wait a minute. I'm fine. Temporary intrusion. All right. It's always a pleasure to see Arabs in Minnesota. And I want to tell you something. With God's help, we're going to give you a lot of your cousins to come here too. Let's get back to the speech. Temporary intrusion. Very, very temporary. This speech continues. All right. Yeah. Not only dumb, but ugly, too. All right. Bear in mind that when they clapped, they were clapping for the murder of 3 Jews. So every Jew who is sitting here and who is against Kahane, understand they're not against Kahane. They're against Zionism. They're against the Jewish state. And every Arab who is honest, and most of them are honest, will admit it. Now, it's not going to help you. Clearly, the level of, academics at this college has reached a new high. The fact is, I have the microphone, and I can outshout them at any time. Let's continue. Let us continue now. People will have a chance to speak or curse at the proper time. The truth of the matter is, the Intifada did not begin 3 years ago. The Intifada began 70 years ago in 1920, when Jews were murdered by Arabs in Jerusalem, that they don't call Jerusalem, they call Al-Quds. You know why it began in 1920? Because the Arabs knew that Zionism's purpose was to create a Jewish state. And so they're against the Jewish state. They're not against a Jewish state within the 1967 boundaries. Because if that's all that bothered them, the 1967 boundaries, how come there was no peace in 1966? In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan to create two states, Jewish, Arab. Guess who said no? Guess who said no? You have 20 chances to guess who said no. The Arabs said no, and they went to war. They could have had not only what they call the West Bank, but they could have had Western Galilee. They could have had Jaffa. They could have had Ramleh. They could have had Lida. They could have had Nahariya. They could have had Ashdod and Ashkelon and Beersheba. They said no. You know why? Because they wanted everything. So they went to war and they lost. And they lost. And then they went to war in 1967 again and they lost. And they're in a rut. And they're in a rut because, fellas, if you would ever be so dumb as to try a war again, this time Jordan belongs to us too. Isn't it great for about time to hear a Jewish speaker speak who isn't a wimp? Oh, what a pleasure. Now, they don't want the occupied. Everybody talks now about there are Arab moderates. The latest concept, Arab moderates. There are even moderate terrorists today, moderate terrorists, who murder Jews moderately. So people say, see, Hussein of Jordan is a moderate. Of course, no question about it. In 1967, King Hussein had Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, and he went to war. It doesn't take more than a freshman scholar to realize that if someone has East Jerusalem and he goes to war, maybe he wants West Jerusalem. maybe. And West Tel Aviv and West Haifa. There's not one Arab standing here who won't tell you that Jaffa is Arab too. Right? Right. There's not one Arab that won't tell you that Tel Aviv is Arab too, and that Haifa is Arab too, and that the Galilee is Arab. Of course, that's what they believe. So don't fall into this stupid trap. If Israel would only give up the lands which the Arabs already had in 1967, then there would be peace. They don't want peace. They want to wipe out Israel, and they will never do that. It belongs to us and not to them, period. Sit down. You'll get your turn right now. I speak. This is not the Knesset, fella. One person speaks here at a time. You will sit down. I speak and not you, so shut up. Now, so therefore, don't believe the Palestinians. Just ignore him. I'm speaking now. I have the microphone, and I can be heard, and he can't. Now, so therefore, understand that they murdered Jews in the 1920s, and they murdered Jews in the 1930s, and they murdered Jews in the 1940s, and there was no occupied land in 1967. And therefore, I tell you, with a heavy heart, I who want peace, I want peace much, much more than any Jew living in Minneapolis, because I don't live here, I live there, and my two sons serve in the army there, and I want peace more than anyone there, and therefore with a heavy heart I say, there will not be peace, because they don't want peace, and Zionism did not come into being for peace. Zionism came into being for a Jewish state. Hopefully with peace, but peace or no peace, a Jewish state, and you can eat your heart out. Now, the answer is that there is no Arab problem. There's a Jewish problem. There's a Jewish problem. Jews suffer from a specific form of AIDS, a specific form of Jewish AIDS. It's called guilt. No one feels guiltier more than Jews do. We have honed it to a fine art. We feel guilty about surviving. We feel guilty about living. We feel guilty about having a Jewish state that persecutes the poor Palestinians who only tried to wipe us out for 70 years. So therefore, let me tell you something. It is better to win than to lose. For 2,000 years, we were losers. Today, we are winners. It is so much better to be a winner. It is better to live than to die. The world has loved us for 2,000 years because we died. It is better to live than to die, and it's better to have an Israel that is hated by the whole world than an Auschwitz that is loved by it. And know that, and understand that. Now, this poor fellow here, this poor fellow is frustrated. You know why? Because he is an Arab. He is an... Just get over there, fella. All right. It is unbelievable. He says, I'm Jew. If you're Jewish, I'm a Swede. Now, in any case, his frustration is that in 2.5 weeks, I go back home to Israel, and they have to stay here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so, therefore, understand, no guilt, no guilt. For 1,800 years, we had no state. For 1,800 years, we enjoyed such wonderful benefits as pogroms and crusades and Auschwitzes, and never again. Never, never again. Now, the other thing that I wanted to speak about, see, not Meir Kahane. Every Jew, listen carefully. Not Meir Kahane's racism, Zionism's racism. Every Hillel member here who had the lack of self-respect to hand this out, knowing that Arabs are going to be here, no, they're not against me. They're against every Zionist, and they're against the Jewish state, and you should be ashamed of yourself because I understand.